You walk into a room. People are talking, laughing, moving around each other with what looks like ease. And somewhere in the middle of all that noise, you feel it. This quiet, hollow sensation that you are not quite there. That even if you disappeared right now, the room would keep going. The conversation would keep flowing. No one would pause. No one would notice the gap where you were standing. If you know that feeling, this video is for you. Feeling invisible is one of the most quietly painful experiences a person can carry. It doesn't announce itself loudly. It doesn't look like a crisis from the outside. But on the inside, it can feel like a slow erosion, like you are slowly becoming less real, less present, less worth noticing. And the longer it goes on, the more you start to believe it might simply be true. It isn't. But to understand why it happens, we need to go deeper than surface advice. Let's start with what this feeling actually is. Feeling invisible is not the same as being shy. It's not the same as being introverted, or quiet, or reserved. Those are personality traits. Feeling invisible is something else. It's a wound. It's the experience of being present in a space and sensing that your presence doesn't register, that your words don't land, that your thoughts, your humor, your pain, your joy, none of it seems to reach anyone. And one of the most important things Carl Jung ever observed about human beings is this: we do not suffer most from what happens to us. We suffer most from the meaning we assign to what happens to us. When you feel invisible repeatedly, you begin to assign a meaning to it. And that meaning almost always becomes personal. You stop thinking, this situation doesn't bring out the best in me. You start thinking, something wrong with me. That shift from situation to identity is where the real damage begins. So where does this pattern come from? Jung spoke at length about what he called the persona, the mask we construct to meet the world. From a very young age, most of us learn which parts of ourselves are welcome and which parts are not. Maybe you were the quiet child in a loud family, and your quietness was read as a problem. Maybe you were sensitive in an environment that rewarded toughness. Maybe you were curious and thoughtful in a social group that valued performance and noise. Over time, you learned to shrink, not because you were weak, but because shrinking felt safer. You pulled the most authentic parts of yourself back behind the mask. And you sent the mask out into the world instead. And here's the painful irony. When you sent only the mask, people respond to the mask. And because the mask is not really you, their response, even when it's positive, doesn't reach you. You remain invisible, not because others can't see you, but because you haven't fully shown up. This is not a character flaw. It is a survival strategy that has outlived its usefulness. Dale Carnegie, who spent decades studying how human beings connect with one another, made a quiet but profound observation. People are not primarily interested in you. They are interested in themselves. And the people who feel most connected in social situations are not necessarily the most impressive or the most attractive. They are the ones who make others feel genuinely noticed. Now, some people hear that and feel deflated, but there is something liberating in it if you look carefully, because it means the feeling invisible in a room is often less about your worth and more about the dynamic of the room itself. Most people in any social gathering are quietly performing, quietly competing for attention, quietly hoping to be seen. In that environment, the person who is genuinely present, who listens, who asks a real question, who responds to what was actually said, stands out in a way that no performance can replicate. The Stoics understood something similar. Marcus Aurelius wrote that we suffer more in imagination than in reality. The story you tell yourself about what others think of you is almost always more severe than what they actually think. Most people, most of the time, are too absorbed in their own internal world to be forming the harsh judgments you fear. The silence after you speak is rarely contempt. It is usually just the ordinary noise of people thinking about themselves. But knowing this intellectually and feeling it in your body are two different things. So let's talk about what actually shifts the experience. The first thing is this: stop trying to be interesting and start trying to be interested. This is not a social trick. It is a genuine reorientation. When you walk into a room focused on whether people will notice you, you are placing yourself in a passive position, waiting to be chosen, waiting to be seen. When you walk in focused on what you might notice about others, you become active. You become the one who sees. And something strange happens when you genuinely see people. They feel it. They turn toward it. They remember it. The second thing is learning to tolerate your own presence. This sounds simple, but it is one of the deeper challenges in psychology. Many people who feel invisible are actually deeply uncomfortable with being noticed. There is a part of them that wants to be seen, and another part that is terrified of it. Call this a conflict between the ego and the shadow. The part of you that was told your presence was too much, too strange, too soft, too loud, too different. That shadow material doesn't disappear. It sits just beneath the surface, pulling you back every time you start to emerge. The work is not to silence that part. The work is to understand it, to ask, when did I first learn that taking up space was dangerous? Whose voice is it that tells me I am too much or not enough? Because very often, that voice belongs to someone from your past, a parent, a peer, a teacher, and it has been running on a loop ever since, mistaken for your own. You are allowed to take up space, not because you have earned it through achievement or performance, but because you exist. That is enough of a reason. The third thing, and perhaps the most important, is to stop measuring your worth by the response of the room. The Stoics called this the discipline of desire, learning to want only what is within your control. You cannot control whether a particular group of people notices you, values you, or makes space for you. What you can control is whether you show up honestly, whether you speak when you have something real to say, and whether you treat your own inner life as something worth protecting. Some rooms will never see you, not because you are invisible, but because they are not looking for what you carry. That is not a verdict on your worth. It is information about the room. There is a kind of person who moves through the world quietly, who thinks deeply, who feels things with unusual intensity, who doesn't perform their emotions for an audience. The world doesn't always know what to do with that person, but history is full of them. Shrinking, who stopped waiting to be chosen, did so not by becoming louder, but by becoming more fully themselves. You are not invisible because you are unworthy. You may be invisible because you have been taught to make yourself small, and because the spaces you've been in haven't known how to receive you. Both of those things can change. Start with this. The next time you are in a room and feel that hollow sensation creeping in, don't retreat further into yourself. Don't perform. Just look at one person and ask them something real. Not a pleasantry, a real question. And then listen. Not to plan your response, but to actually hear them. That small act is the beginning of presence. And presence is the opposite of invisibility. If this video reached something in you, consider sharing it with someone who might need to hear it. And if you want to keep exploring the deeper patterns of how we think, feel, and connect, Inside the Labyrinth is here for exactly that. And if this spoke to a part of you that rarely gets heard, stay with that feeling for a moment. You are not broken because you feel deeply. You are only beginning to understand yourself. Subscribe to Inside the Labyrinth for more reflections on the hidden patterns of the human mind.